welcome. CT here. This is the spoiler review for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes 2024, action adventure science fiction genre, and it takes place many, many years after the original trilogy that began with Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Okay, let's get into it. This movie takes place hundreds of years in the future, as I said, from the Rise series. It features ape characters as the main characters. We have three in particular. They appear to be younger apes, as the movie has a coming of age thing that they're going through with their clan, their civilization, their village, their town of people. We have Noah, who is the main character, and his friends, Suna and Anaya. We have Noah's parents. We have the other people that live in their community, in their village. They all seem to be very close, or at least get along well, peaceful type of community and town. They have an interesting thing where their unique clan thing or group thing is the raising of eagles. And so this rite of passage has to do with eagles. And I won't get into it too much. I knew those things would come into play later, and they did not disappoint. Then we have a human character, which we actually meet relatively early on, as she is found looking for food in Noah's place where they live. And it's really their crossing of paths that ends up leading to disaster. It's not intended, but it's what happens. Essentially, this other group of apes who proclaim Caesar. It's Caesar's word, it's Caesar's will, and these group of apes attack our main character's group of apes and destroy his home. That sets off the preceding story, where now Noah is the only one left at home. He was believed dead, he fell. He meets an ape who is all alone now, named Raka. Raka is my favorite character. Raka better be fine, is what I'm saying. You don't take Raka out like that, okay? The guy is awesome. We need more Raka in our lives. I want to see Raka in the future. If there are more movies, I want more Raka. Anyway, Raka is presumably an older ape. He seems wiser, and he's an orangutan. Noah meets him. Raka tells him he knows all about Caesar. And in case you are not aware, Caesar is the main ape from the original series of 3 movies, starting with Rise. Caesar was the original smarter ape that set off all the other apes into getting smarter, accidentally infecting mankind, and all that all comes about from Caesar's story. And Caesar was raised by a human man, which plays into Caesar's beliefs of liking humans and wanting to coexist with humans, because no matter how many years passed, he always still has that life that he remembers where he was raised by a loving father who was a human. Of course, Caesar is long dead. This other group who proclaim Caesar's name, we'll get into that later, but basically their leader acts like he's speaking for Caesar and Caesar's beliefs, even while acting completely the opposite of Caesar's beliefs. Noah and Raka end up joining with a human woman who they call Nova, but we learn her name is May, and she can speak, which should be pretty obvious almost immediately because she is notably dressed in a way you would not expect a human to be dressed if they had so-called reverted to primitive instincts living out in the wild. If you've seen the original Planet of the Apes movie from 1968, then you'll know what I'm talking about with the whole covering barely anything, being dirty and not being able to speak, and she dresses differently, which makes her stand out, which I found amusing personally. There's a point where she says she learned to be silent to protect herself because smart human might be a threat to the other apes, or so she's been told to believe. But nobody told her to change her clothing, I guess, because even the apes that end up the Caesar apes, as I'll just call them. Well, no, I don't want to. I don't want to defame this guy any more than has already been done by this group. Okay, so the guy is also called Proximus. Proximus, Caesar Proximus. It's Caesar's proxy in his head, but Proximus. He is the main antagonist of the story. He is the leader of this other violent group of apes who are more than willing to kill other apes and capture them and enslave them. They also do that hunting down humans and capturing humans and things like that. Although it's unclear if they actually keep them or we're just looking for certain ones. And they are looking for May, the human woman I mentioned, who can talk and is dressed differently. And yeah, as I said, I keep referring to how she's dressed differently because even these apes are like that one when they see her. Like, she clearly looks different. She's got to be the one we're looking for. And we find that they do know and are aware that there are humans out there with intelligence still. Alright, so this is a bit of a spoiler for Rise of the Planet of the Apes series, the 3 movies. It is shown to be a virus, an infection, that kills off most of humanity, regresses everyone else into not being able to speak, having a lower intelligence. Something I hadn't really thought about until this movie, but makes perfect sense, is there has to be a population of the planet that would have been immune to everything. She is from those people, probably either immune or just descended down from them. I'm unclear on that. And the movie does not go into it very much. Point being, she stands out. She's different. She's of normal intelligence. She very much resembles what I would imagine a present day person, even in 2024, would be like. We have Noah, May, and Raka traveling together. And Noah's one and only goal is to find his people and bring them home. That's what he wants. He's also looking for a little bit of payback, I'm sure. He's very angry. And the movie is essentially about him learning about the wider world and seeing different perspectives. Raka is able to tell him about Caesar's true beliefs and ways and about the humans, who they didn't even know they were called humans, Noah's group and Noah, because it's been so long. They called them echoes. They're just things. They don't really know about them at all. And so he's very surprised to learn that it used to be the opposite, where humans dominated the planet and apes really, they coexisted. Here's something that I'm not sure if I misunderstood or if Noah was misunderstanding or what's going on. Raka mentions that Caesar believed in coexisting with humans and that they used to. Now, it's possible he was referring to one or of 2 options. Either he was referring to a time when it's like now, where apes live in zoos and such, and that's they're coexisting side by side. But and that could be what the movie's going for, but that kind of rings hollow for me if it was, because I thought what Raka meant Caesar meant was, I thought Caesar was talking about where after everything fell, after civilization fell, that there was some humans attempting to and apes attempting to live side by side or learning to do that. So I thought that's what they were talking about, but it's very possible he was just talking about the time when apes were in cages, in which case I really wouldn't call that living alongside humans. That's, I guess it's technically true, because you might put your dog in a cage, but they're still living side by side. I don't know. The connection was a little weak there. And for me, I thought that was strange. And the movie definitely doesn't go with the message I was thinking it was going to go. So, also a factor. I thought the message of the movie would end up being, we can, now that you're intelligent and we are still intelligent as humans, apes and humans can coexist. Why not, right? You're of equal intelligence or at least similar intelligence. That's not the message of the movie. as far as I can tell, well, let's just say I feel everyone has their own motivations, their own goals, and people that they care about and are doing things for. They don't necessarily align, but there's no reason that they can't align. And so I thought the message was going to go with, we can live side by side, but the message seemed to be, maybe, but maybe not. Okay. I don't really see the point of hurting a bunch of peaceful apes living on their own in the wild. The message was muddled for me. If you've seen the movie, maybe let me know if you have a different perspective in the comments that could enlighten me, because I was a little bit like, huh, Okay, well, that was different. It's not a problem if that's what they're going for, where the message is meant to be muddled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me get to that end part later. The three of them traveling, and then they eventually encounter this violent group of Proximus's people. The apes claiming to be for Caesar, but are clearly just using his words to do whatever they want. We get to see this other group living by the sea, and how they have turned. If you've seen the last movie before this one, it's essentially the humans were enslaving apes to work for them in that one, and this is the reverse. Well, not quite the reverse, actually, because it's not humans they're enslaving. It's the apes are enslaving other apes to become part of their group against their will, and they're making them work for them. A lot of this movie happens before we even get to this antagonist's home. By the time we get to it, the movie's almost over, which I actually found intriguing. It's unexpected and it allowed us to get to know the world and the characters a lot before we got to the conflict. The conflict really was just between apes that live in seclusion and just have their own perspectives and lives that they care about, apes that know about the wider reality of humans and apes and Caesar's beliefs, what they can offer, and then, of course, the human perspective from those who managed to survive the fall hundreds of years later. Humans are still around with intelligence. I was not expecting that, and that was very intriguing. So, if there are future movies, I would definitely be interested to see where they're going with the story. And with this story, then, at the antagonist Proximus's home, he is someone who is trying to break through this door. It seems to be a very old military base or shelter, somewhere you would go when everything went to heck. They want to get in there because he knows there has to be. This was another thing that I'd have to rewatch to make sure I was understanding the meaning correctly. He's either going in there because he knows there are weapons and he wants the weapons for power, although I feel like he was already doing well enough on his own to not really need that. So I personally got the impression he somehow thought humans had a way to live longer, and so he wanted to get in there to somehow find a way to live longer, for to make himself live longer. That's my impression I got from the scene where he reveals what he wants out of that bunker or building, why he wants to get through that door, which is a very heavy, solid thing that's been impossible to get through thus far. And so he's been collecting. Well, he only has one other until he collects May, but he appears to be collecting humans that are of higher intelligence, hoping that they'll be able to figure out how to open the door. And here we get a very loathsome character. I probably dislike him more than I dislike Proximus or any of the other antagonist apes. Now, he's played by William H. Macy, and if you know him, of course, great actor, always fun. And it's no different here, but he's such a weasel. He's that guy who is just perfectly fine being in a nice cage, which is where he is. It's basically like a nice little apartment in the ape kingdom or whatever you want to call it. But he's still locked into that apartment where he gets to live comfortably. So he's a guy who's just fine with living in a cage, and in return, he has to teach Proximus things about humans and entertain him as well, tell him stories and such. In other words, a total sellout. I don't think it's as simple as him believing that this is just the way the world is. I think he's just too weak willed to do anything but live as comfortable as he can before he goes, kind of thing. He's just very for himself. And so when this guy gets got, I was like, fine, it had to happen, whatever. Ugh, such a weasel. Disappointing to the very bitter end. May was a much more interesting character than I thought she was going to be, only because I thought we were just getting a female version of that. Oh, look, a character who's smarter than the other humans kind of arc where there was a male in the original 60s and 70s series. But this one, it was different. She's not. Presumably not from a different time, not from space or anything like a lot of the other arcs and stories in the movies they attempted or had in the past. She just appears to be a descendant of people who survived all this time and were not affected or managed to avoid the contagion, whichever. And she was more interesting because She is her own character. She's different, and it's not just a rehash. And she even was very surprising in that you genuinely didn't know. I'm not saying she's bad, but she clearly has her own goals, her own needs, and she'll do what she has to do. She's just unpredictable. And while Noah, you know what you're going to get because you get to know him and his people, so you know what he's about. With her, she's a little bit more mysterious and a little bit more who are her people? Where is she from? We think she could be all alone, and that's why she's so angry because the apes didn't realize they were intelligent and killed everyone that she was with. I'm not sure if it was just a group of people or if they were family, but either way, I think they hunt humans. I'm not clear why. The movie doesn't really go into it. I didn't really I didn't really there were definitely moments where I did get a little confused. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was certainly I hope this is intentionally being vague to lead to something in the future because otherwise it's just vague and that can be kind of annoying. Anyway, Raka goes out too soon before we get to the bad guy's stronghold. Ugh. I knew he was going to get got, and I refuse to believe it. I'm in denial until it's proven permanent. Raka will return. He's awesome. But for now, he's presumably gone. And we're moving on. We get the conflict with that door at the antagonist's base, his kingdom. Who can trust who with Noah and May? Can they trust each other to get out of this situation? Can they team up so that Noah can save his people and May can do whatever important thing she claims she needs to do? Which she says she needs to get through the door to get a device so her people can speak, I believe she says. She says it in such a way that my BS detector went off and went, "What? What are you actually talking about? This is something bigger and way different than whatever you're saying. There's no device that you can use." She claims it's like a book, but not a book to allow her people to speak or whatever, communicate. I don't remember the word she used, but it was definitely okay, she's after something else that she is going to hide from them. They get through that door one way or the other. She gets what she wants. For some reason, the apes were just fine with hanging back and just letting her do what she wanted to do in private, which I found strange. It did allow them, though, the time to be exploring on their own, and they see an old kid's book where they see Noah in particular because of what Raka told him about Caesar's book, where Caesar had a book talking about all the ways things used to be with the humans and apes and how things are now and how it should be. No apes hurting apes and so forth for a nice civilization free of conflict. And so Noah definitely puts it together like, oh, so these letters are the symbols that mean things, but they don't know how to read. In this one, they mostly speak, but the clan, at least alone, it's unclear. I don't think the Proximus, his people or anyone, can sign language, but Noah and his people do sign and are able to communicate that way when they can't openly speak, which I found a cool little detail. Certain groups of apes had still maintained the sign language they had learned, while others hadn't, or at least don't use it. The way the conflict is resolved is pretty. This movie does a really good job of keeping you guessing the entire time, and I was never bored. I didn't feel like there were any dull moments because there was always something going on. The setting's beautiful. The movie just looks really good. Of course, the apes and the way the technology shows them hasn't changed. Very good realism while giving us all the emotions and things. It's not like the dull, lifeless Lion King supposed live action that isn't live action, still animated. Whatever. Anyway, I'm digressing. It looks good. There's a nice little touch where people will look up to the sky with wonder, and you see the comparison from humans to apes both doing it, and that's a neat little thing to add in there. I had a good time with it. I love adventure stuff, adventure stories and characters and things. If you're looking for something with constant action or constant stimulation, this probably isn't it. If you didn't like the previous 3 movies, you will not like this movie. If, like me, you mainly only like some of them and don't think you can like a movie from the perspective of animals like this, even though they're higher intelligent ones, I would still say give it a chance because I absolutely didn't really care for two of those previous Rise of the Planet of the Apes movies because while the Rise one had a lot of human perspective, so I really liked that. I didn't really like the next two because it didn't have that. There were human characters and human perspectives, but it was mainly told from Caesar's perspective and the apes. And for some reason, those movies just, I didn't care. I didn't feel for them. I don't know why. I'm wondering if it's maybe because that series started with the human perspective, so then to suddenly switch to an ape's perspective, it was jarring and just kind of weird. But that's how it was for me. This movie has all new characters. It's mainly apes, and yet I really liked them. I was really interested. My favorite character is an orangutan. Things change. This movie is a great standalone. Although, again, you do get the callbacks, specifically in case you do not remember or you haven't seen. In the first Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Caesar is raised by his father in a house, and there is a distinctive window in the attic where his room is that looks sort of like a diamond, but with curved sides, and then there's a circle around it. And that was his window in his bedroom where he grew up in that house. And that is the symbol for Caesar. And Caesar continued to use that symbol of his home to represent himself, his home, and his beliefs. This continues on into this movie where you'll see it used properly, like Caesar intended, and of course by this Proximus guy who's just abusing the rulings to try to say, well, because I say I'm Proximus, Caesar, that means that you have to believe me and follow me, and it's bizarre. I get it. If you don't want to invest in 3 other movies before watching this one, you do not need to. You can watch this one. And I do recommend you watch this one. I think if you like an adventure movie, you'll probably like this movie. It is rather long, almost 2.5 hours. If you are a more impatient person, you might not like this movie. But I really do give it a strong recommend. I just had a really good time following Noah on this coming of age expanding awareness of the world around after something happens. And those eagles they raise 100% come back around, and the end, went in there with low expectations, came out pleasantly surprised. It's just good, fun entertainment. That's all from me then. Thank you for watching. I hope I proved enlightening at least a little bit. Now I'd like to hear from you. Have you seen this movie? Did you like it? Was it a miss for you? For me, out of my yay or nay scale on this kind of thing with reviews, it was a yay. I like this movie. I will watch this movie again. If you've seen any of the other movies, any of the other Planet of the Apes movies, which ones have you seen? What's your ranking of the movies? If you've seen all of the movies, or even just your ranking from the ones you did see. What do you think about this franchise? Do you think it's a waste of time? Do you think it's a really interesting exploration into what if territory? Let me know all that you think. And please do like and subscribe. Life's rough. Remember to stay entertained.